This is a presentation about the lifetime risk of violent death for a person living right now. This presentation is linked in the bottom if a person wants to analyze it and look at it. These kind of analyses are impossible without AI, and I hope that AI will save humanity. Unfortunately, it seems that it's being used for the military, and once the military gets robots or the elites get robots, then it's game over for pretty much everyone on planet Earth. They'll try and exterminate at least 90% of humanity, if not more, and there's nothing we can do against a solid metal war machine. Anyways, this is a 3,000 years of bodies counted honestly. So it begins with R.J. Rummel, who inspired this presentation. Rudolph Joseph Rummel was a political scientist at the University of Hawaii. He coined the term democide, murder by government. And he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't win it. How could he win it? Because he went directly against the U.S. military machine, so he couldn't be acknowledged fully for his work. But people like Obama can win it. I mean, we are a very violent species and justify murder and call it war or other things. So annual rates conceal, lifetime risks reveal. Most people are familiar with the one in 100,000 or whatever in 100,000 statistics. Let's say for vehicle deaths. So I think this is for this is for United States. So 13 fatalities per 100,000 people per year right now in the United States. But this isn't reality. It doesn't tell you the real truth. The real truth, and the math is complicated. If you don't have a degree in calculus or in mathematics or statistics, then it's very hard to sort this out. But obviously, we have AI to do this for us. And so the lifetime chance of dying in a car accident in the United States is 1 in 100. That's pretty grim. It's about 1 in 20 for an iron worker, I believe. 1 in 120, yes. And the top 10 most dangerous jobs are around that baseline too. So if, say, a miner, a logger, or an iron worker drive, their accumulated risk goes up. But anyways, I'm going to keep it kind of simple here. So let's do this for war in Europe over the past 3,000 years. So about 8 billion people lived in Europe over the past 3,000 years. 120 of them, 120 million murdered each other. And Europeans like to think of themselves as civilized, but we'll touch on that. I guess they are in a sense, but not nearly. I think Canada is probably the best place right now, and Australia. Death from the lifetime risk of dying by organized violence in Europe was 1 in about 70, 1 in 67. Who knows? 1 in 60, somewhere around there. More than half of it happened in 31 years from World War I to the end of World War II. 65 million people killed each other or murdered each other in Europe. It's hard to fathom that whites would murder whites. It's absolutely crazy. So risk for European alive in that window was 1 in 11, and in the Soviet Union 1 in 7. I don't know how much of my family got murdered. Both my grandparents from my father's side and my mom's side were fluent in Russian because they got deported to Kazakhstan and Siberia. And about, I don't want to say half the family was killed, but a significant percentage, like it's staggering. China ran the same experiment and got worse results. Chinese, ruthlessly brutal people, mainly because they live in the most fertile place in the world. For growing crops and livestock. And so basically they massively overbred, and the conflicts and the death rates and the starvation and the butchery was staggering, absolutely staggering. About 1 in 40 to 1 in 80. We can safely say probably 1 in 60 risk of dying by violence for a Chinese individual over the past 3,000 years, I'd say. Yeah. and they don't like to talk about it. So it gets even worse for primitive tribes. A lot of people have a mythical notion that primitive tribes or before colonization were peaceful. It's nothing can be further from the truth. I mean, the vast majority of them were absolutely horrendous. About 14% murder rate for both men, women, and children. And it gets even worse for certain tribes in Ecuador. Some of the tribes that have 50% murder rate. I mean, this stuff is insane. And then they like to come back and say colonialism was bad. I mean, colonialism was bad. It was way worse before. And we know the Aztecs and the people in Mexico had human sacrifice. And I mean, I don't know how people can be so simple-minded to believe that 100 conquistadors conquered all of Central and South America. That's impossible. The tribes around these Mayan and Aztec cultures and the Inca, they hated them because the people were butchering them and sacrificing them. So anyways, now I'm going to touch on the safest place to live on Earth, or one of the safest, I believe. Before I talk about this, I want to mention New Zealand, because a lot of people don't know that the soils in New Zealand can't support livestock, really. They don't have minerals, and so, or at least enough minerals to support large-scale livestock production. And so if the web of civilization breaks apart and imports stop to New Zealand, I mean, virtually everyone is dead on the island. And a lot of people don't know that. They think it's a good place to prep and to buy houses from the apocalypse. It's one of the worst places to buy a house to save oneself from the apocalypse. And the oceans are virtually empty of fish now, so it can only support a fraction of its current population anyways. So Newfoundland Island only is probably one of the safest places to live on planet Earth right now if you're Caucasian. If you're not Caucasian, I would think long and hard before moving there, because the early history of Newfoundland is pretty brutal. They had the most powerful pirate colonies that ever existed, and the British couldn't break them, so they pardoned them. And that's alongside the original native population was exterminated also, which is unfortunate. On the island, it was I'll spare the stories I've been told by grandparents, great grandparents of Newfoundlanders I've talked to. Anyways, that's the way it was. It's not like that now, and I think Newfoundland is the safest place to live on Earth. Canada is 1 in 760, so Newfoundland is twice as safe as Canada for murder rate. And Labrador, which is the same province as Newfoundland, which is on the mainland, has actually a higher rate than the average Canadian total, which actually the Canadian total includes Newfoundland, so it's kind of, I should have done it without Newfoundland included, but anyways. And the United States is horrific, 1 in 233, which gets worse. Then the next slide, I'll explain that. Europe over 3,000 years, about 1 in 70 murder rate, and then anyways. So there's some people dispute this information, but even if we go to the very floor of the skeptics, it's about 5%, which is brutal. So 1 in 20 chance of getting murdered in tribal communities, pre-colonization, pre-civilization. And we don't, these people weren't documented. They had no voice. Basically, wars documented, Roman Empire is documented, people getting slaughtered in their villages isn't, and it over 10,000 years, that adds up to a huge amount. We're a very violent species. And the violence didn't breed out the violent men, unfortunately. It actually amplified certain things. Although right now we're becoming more domesticated over the past couple thousand years, our brow ridges have receded, sexual dimorphism is reduced, but a lot of that in the past 30 or 40 years is due to the toxic food supply and the hormones. And I mean, the young people in North America right now, I mean, they're Their bone structure looks ephemeral. They don't have strong facial features. I mean, it's like looking at balloons with a nose and ears a lot of times. Like, it's pretty scary right now what's going on, but maybe that makes them more non-violent, except that doesn't hold true in the United States. And I'm going to skip this. It's about breeding foxes. It's a good, if you want to read up on it, just go to the presentation link below. I'm gonna skip these until we get to this. So the surgery has saved people in the United States. Without surgery and medical care, the murder rate would be 3 times as high. So the United States right now is pretty much in line with Europe over the past 3,000 years. So the real murder rate, or with attempted murder, is about 1 in 60, 1 in 70. So I would never want to live in the United States. And I don't think it's nearly close to being the best country in the world, like a lot of Americans think it is. I'm gonna skip a lot of this. I want to get to the current conflict in Ukraine. We don't know how many people have died. Some people say 2 million. So right now in Europe, the murder rate, since Europe considers itself a whole, is about 1 in 1,200 per year, which is, lifetime odds right now. So it's actually pretty brutal. Actually, this is not lifetime odds. This is actually annual. So that's how bad it is. 1 in 1,200 rate possibility of getting murder in Europe right now. Pretty brutal. Stats for Canada. I'm just gonna skip through that. So we went from about 1 in 10 to 1 in 760 if a person's living in Canada, which is pretty good. Yeah, that's humanity, and it's we're coming to it seems like civilization's unraveling right now, and things are gonna get horrendous, I imagine, in the next 5 to 10 years. And my goal, yes, it's to move to Newfoundland pretty quick.